Yeah, it's been a real experience. It's been really interesting to like show up with this zeal for fire as an Indigenous trans woman, because let me tell you, the fire world is stacked against Indigenous people, and more so stacked against Indigenous women, isn't even beginning to crack open like trans people, let alone like trans people who are Indigenous or Black or POC or BIPOC in some way. I think about it, and I mean, it's when it comes to like inclusivity in the fire world, I feel like it's so far behind.
This is the Good Fire Podcast, stories of Indigenous fire stewardship, cultural and social empowerment, and environmental integrity. Tensei, everyone. I'm Amy Cardinal Christianson. I'm the host for this season of the Good Fire Podcast that's all focused on matriarchs. And I'm really excited for this episode today where we're really going to talk about something important to me, which is, supporting all types of diversity in fire. And so we're going to be talking to Jessica Angel, who's a trans woman in fire, who's Indigenous from the US and really has amazing and important stories to share about her experience as a trans person in fire. Again, we had an episode last year with Joe Gilchrist and Natasha Caverly about cultural safety of Indigenous firefighters. And from that study is a lot of Indigenous people experience racism, discrimination, and harassment on the fire line when trying to, be involved in the current wildfire culture that we have in Canada. I mean, it's even worse for trans people, for other members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community of what they experience, but yet they continue to love fire and to be involved in this type of work. So yeah, really excited to have Jessica on, and Vikki Preston from Karuk will be joining us again to give kind of a little bit of an overview of what she's been doing in the last few weeks. And then we're going to get into a great discussion with Jessica. So yeah, see you after the convo. Okay, hi, welcome to Good Fire. We're here for another episode in our matriarch seasons. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Vikki Preston. So you'll remember Vikki from a previous matriarch episode. Hey, Vikki.
Hi, Ayuki, everybody.
Yeah, so we did a really kind of fun episode sitting in a hotel room in front of a fireplace in Monterey, California with Monique, just chatting about our experiences as being women in fire. So I thought, I'd bring Vikki back and see how you're doing since we did that, and then bring in our guest for today.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to be back on. I really love and appreciate both of y'all. So I just, for the most part, was just excited to talk with y'all in general, no matter what the setting or place.
yeah.
Usually going to be a yes. So yeah, I've just been working. Working here in Orleans for the Cadic Tribe and Culture Resources. We had a little bit of a burn window last week even, and so we did some burning. We had all of Junction Elementary School out to do some cultural burning with us with some pitch sticks, and managed to cycle all the kids through. We live in a very small community, so there's about 23 kids in the whole school. So
cool, though.
You don't have to imagine like a huge school of kids. It was fairly small, but it was super fun. And so I was glad that we've been doing some of that work. I'm really excited to hear about some of the burning you've been doing recently, Jessica. And I have been busy working, and we've been planning our Indigenous Women's Plus treks in the end of June. So kind of been doing that and just generally feels like a busy spring. Last week was very busy. When it's the burn windows are there, it's like you have to put it on top of all the other things that are already going on. So
Yeah, I
anyway,
can't miss those windows.
so yeah, I guess that's like a general update since the AFI conference in
Awesome. Yeah, it's
December.
good to good to see you again. It was weird. We had in Canada too, like kind of a really good burn window right at the beginning of March where it was like 15 Celsius above. And then like 2 days later, we were expecting over 1.5 feet of snow. So we were out there just burning because we knew that it was like coming, that snow. But yeah, really kind of weird with climate change, but also really nice to be out early putting fire on the ground.
Dang, that's a lot of snow.
I know. It's starting to melt now. Hopefully, we're in spring a little bit here, but we needed it. Like, we're in such bad drought conditions.
Mhm.
Nice to get a little bit. So yeah, so our guest today is actually someone I think I met you both, like Vikki, for the first time in person at the first Kook W Trex event, and also as well met Jessica there. And so I have to tell the story of when I first met Jessica there, and yeah, and then Jessica, I'll get you to introduce yourself after. So I had just arrived into going on like a crazy drive from what Medford is it, I think, in Oregon. And I had kind of driven down through some kind of conservative communities and then wearing my Justice for Indigenous shirt, which is always great. And then over like the mountain range with the Slater fire, I think it was called there,
Yeah.
and looking at that devastation. Anyways, kind of rolled in. I went to the office building. No one from WTX was there because you guys had decided to take a break. So ended up like out at some random house, like on the banks of the beautiful, I think Salmon River was there, right? Vikki, yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm sitting there talking. I can't remember who I was talking to, and I just looked to my right, and like out of the forest, kind of there comes this beautiful woman wearing this like long flowing dress, like hair all drenched, covered in dew from like just being in the water on a beautiful day, and that was my intro to Jessica. Jessica was just like, "Oh, hi, Amy, how are you?" Like, just really good friends from the start. And so I knew when we were doing the matriarch season, Jessica, that you had to be a guest on it. I just think, the work that you do is amazing. And also, you're an incredibly funny person and amazing storyteller. So I'm really excited for everyone else to meet and hear your story.
Oh, well, Mossy, Amy, and Vicky, I'm so happy that I get to be here. Well, just to introduce myself, Tlahayim Shik, I'm Jessica Angel. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a cultural fire practitioner, and I'm an enrolled member of the Chinook Indian Nation. My family's Clatsop and Lower Chinook from both sides of the Columbia River. Um, yeah, that day, and yeah, I'm a Indigenous trans woman who does fire, which
Yeah.
makes for a very interesting career.
Yeah.
That day was such a wild, hectic day down at KW Trex, and I think we'd all just kind of hit a point where we decided we needed to go and cool off and get into the get into the water. And it was so funny. We had just been swimming, and it was during the like fall salmon run, so it was like swimming with like giant, huge salmon down in the water at the Salmon River, and came out, and um yeah, you'd rolled up, and I was so impressed. I didn't even know that you could like fly in and out of Medford, Oregon.
Yeah.
I was like, who would ever want to do that? Um,
It's actually
so
not a terrible airport. So yeah,
no,
shout out
yeah,
to Medford.
no one's ever said that on a podcast before. Shout out Medford. Yeah, right through the heart of like the state of Jefferson, the
Yeah.
like white supremacist secessionist movement.
Hmm.
It's so yeah. Wow, I'm just so grateful to get to sit down and talk to you both today and share stories.
Yeah, awesome. Jessica, so can you tell us a little bit about what you do for kind of your day job in terms of fire?
Well, yeah, and I am I was working at Eco Studies Institute, which is a nonprofit based out of Olympia, Washington. And this past fall, I actually left my job there and decided to kind of take a break from working in the nonprofit sector and approach cultural fire and Indigenous fire from like a community perspective, you know? And so I'm doing a little bit less like on the ground work right now. Although we did just have our second ever prescribed fire with Chinook people on the ground on Chinook territory to happen since colonization began. So that was like last Friday. So
Oh,
um
wow. Okay. I remember the first one that you told me about in the fall.
right.
So congrats. Exciting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I'm for like the first time in a couple of years not working in fire, but instead getting to approach it as just a person, and it's so different to not like show up to these conversations with like a organization or agency,
Hmm.
you know, and just as a person who cares and has like a responsibility as an Indigenous person to do this. So yeah, I'm in a place where I'm figuring out what connecting with cultural fire looks like on like a personal level, and I think in a year or two I'll be back doing that, but it's a welcomed break.
Hmm.
Yeah, because before that, you were on a prescribed fire crew, right? The wagon, aptly named Wagon Burger Burners crew, right?
Right, totally.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I started 3-ish years ago. I got involved with Indigenous fire. I got my FFT2.
mhm.
Got
What's your
got started.
FFE2? Sorry, your what's
Oh,
that
FFT2?
certification? Yeah.
Yeah, the FFT2 is like basic. I mean, Vikki Preston knows this well. It's the basic firefighting qualification, and honestly, something that I see as like a big barrier to Indigenous people being able to get out and participate in burning in multiple settings is your FFT2 requirements that are required by so many agencies here.
Hmm.
So yeah, I got that now probably 2.5, 3 years ago, and shortly thereafter was one of the founding members of the crew, the Wagon Burners, which was housed at that point at Eco Studies Institute, and we have gone through many iterations, and we had a few like really we had a couple back-to-back burn seasons of just day after day after day after day of just hours and hours of burning all over Oregon, in Washington, and a few of us have been able to go and participate in different Trex events in Northern California and Central California. And now we've kind of the Wagon Burners is no longer housed at Eco Studies. We're independent right now, and we're trying to figure out what next moves look for us as individuals, each from different nations who care about cultural fire and care about fire being revitalized in our communities, but are also figuring out like how do you do that and work a regular job, and how do you do that when you aren't necessarily able to live on your territory, and all these different how do you be a good steward of your land using fire in the 21st century as people who are some of us are displaced, some of us are not, so
Mhm.
yeah, we're kind of in a slower season of our crew life, so
Yeah. Well, I would say like that you're the type of person that can easily get an entire table laughing. And that was, I think, Vicky, probably what you experienced as well at W Checks was just how good you are at bringing people together and just making folks laugh. And I think, I don't know, I think one of my memories, Vicky, from that was you sitting around, Jessica, talking about burning on I think it was the weapons range or the Department of Defense. Yeah, like some of the stories you had there. I don't know, Vicky, if you had any either, but I just remember you had our whole table just howling, laughing.
so Eco Studies is out of Olympia, Washington, and kind of between Olympia and Tacoma is Joint Base Lewis McChord, which is a place that was the Nisqually Indian Reservation up until shortly before World War I, or right around then. And as I understand it, as someone who's not Nisqually, but has been able to spend time up there. Like that was a place where there was, some amount of good fire into the 20th century, and then that land was seized and turned into a military base, like a joint military and Air Force base. It became a place where they were practicing how to drop bombs out of planes and how to detonate different weaponry. It's kind of crazy to be. I spent a lot of time working there last summer and fall, and kind of very interesting to be driving in your engine and like stopping to like look at an area that you're gonna burn or you did burn, and like looking over and seeing on like a fence post barely readable. I have to like get my glasses out and like look and see like stay away, like radioactive materials present, just like just like, oh, okay, well, I would have liked to have known that. But it was a
You're
place.
setting it on fire.
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly, totally. Oh yeah. And so I mean it's a place where they're detonating things all the time, and they've been doing so since like World War I. And so there's actually a high diversity of endangered plants and birds, many of those being dependent on fire and having prairie. It's the South, like Salish Sea prairie ecosystem, that is kind of on top of glacial outwash from the last ice age. And because of like the military's like weapons testing there, and their drills and everything, which I don't necessarily see as positive for our prairies and or positive for Nisqually people's land. It did mean that there was a certain amount of fire coming through at an interval that like kept some of those species able to like repopulate. And so, or as I understand it, I think there's a lot more nuance to that story, but that means that now, because it's federal land, the United States government has to allocate funds to make sure that those endangered species that are present are adequately stewarded, and have
Oh, okay.
conservation efforts happening. And so that's where eco studies gets to come in and help. They have agreements that allow them to do prescribed fire there, which creates this situation where like the more burning we do to help the plants and kill invasive species and promote endangered species growth, the less that everything burns up when they like explode something and it starts a fire, and which happens every single day. So
Yeah.
so many times I've been out there burning because we work with the forestry crew from JBLM, like so many times, like almost every day we'll be out there, and like they'll on their special like TAC channel they have, like they'll get a call that there's a wildfire happening somewhere on base, and they'll have to like zip off to go and address that. Well, we still have fire on the ground over here, but it creates a situation where we're outside of we can burn during burn bans. So
Oh,
local government might say like no burn piles, no campfires, no fire happening at all outside of a wood stove, and that giant piece of land is exempt from that. And so we can actually see like what is it like when you burn 12-foot tall Scotch broom in August, you know? It's really intense. And it creates kind of a sandbox where like, yes, are we burning and there are like large explosions happening kind of nearby, and like many 18-year-old boys in tanks driving in convoys around? Like, yes, but we're able to burn when like no one else is really able to burn, because it's we have like this sandbox to play in. So
yeah. I just
it's
find that juxtaposition, like of the military guys and then your crew, and like putting fire on the ground is like it's just a very odd setup.
it's remarkable. I mean, and for me, it's such cognitive dissonance. Like I think I hadn't really had the experience before of like being that up close and personal to young men with guns, and a lot of them, and equipment. So I think as an Indigenous person, it brought up a lot of emotions for me, especially, like that's the same US government that like participated in like the genocide of Indigenous people all across the United States. And here we are. So
Burn
and
room.
they're not really, and it's so funny because like, I'm not working directly with them. I'm working with, there's a forestry crew that is really actually
Mhm.
a great group of folks who works there. But it is funny being in this weird position of being able to be like, oh, don't mind me. I'm just going to go burn something. Like if I'm in my big engine, they don't mess with us. So, not my not my experience usually when it comes to military and police personnel. So it's it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was going to
yeah.
say too, Jessica, I think what really impressed me as well, because you're quite young as well. And I remember
Mhm.
speaking to you, and it's almost like you're talking to someone who's been running a drip torch for 20 or 25 years, like just your knowledge of ignition techniques and using smoke to draw fire, to draw smoke away from, highways or other areas. Like, I just found it super impressive that you had picked up that much in kind of a relatively short career, just given your age.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, one thing I want to be really like sure to say is I am such a young person in this, and I have access to some of that like knowledge because I have so many amazing teachers and so many people that I get to like witness the work of. I carry that knowledge that I learned there with me, and same for like getting to hear the like deep, rich knowledge that I've been really privileged to be allowed to hear and witness that Vikki and other Karuk people, especially Karuk women, have shared with me. I've also been in a situation where like I get to have, because of things like JBLM, like a lot of on the ground fire time. I mean, I feel like there was a period of time where like barring a few days because of there being too much smoke or something, this last season I feel like we burned every day from like end of June through like beginning of October, every weekday almost. I think something, Amy, that I've talked about with you that I think is so interesting is like sometimes interacting with people who really know a lot about fire and are like really able to articulate a lot of indigenous fire knowledge, but maybe from like an academic background or from a background that isn't as like hands-on. It can be really interesting to compare experiences and sit in those conversations of I don't really always know how to explain some of these things using like eloquent scientific terms
Mhm.
or speak in a way that like is informed by years of research and like academia. But I've seen enough on the ground fire and been able to go and spend so many like hours with a drip torch in my hand or with a tool out there trying to like, work with fire. I think it's that thing, a phrase that I was introduced to very quickly was the best teacher when it comes to working with fire is fire, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, I think Jessica speaking, like, I think you're talking about that an event that we were both at in the fall. So we ran a workshop on basically trying to indigenize fire effects monitoring. So for those people that don't know, it's after a fire happens, there's kind of a whole science and all these different like very Western science forms where you pretty much have to have a PhD to be able to figure out how to fill them in. And our thing is that's always been a barrier for Indigenous peoples because like unless you have that extensive training, how do you fill it in? How do you prove your burn was successful? So really we're looking at coming together with multiple nations to develop our own that, a community member could go and fill out like a post burn or a pre burn, like during the fire and then post fire report or not report, but we're trying to figure out what exactly we're going to do, but something to basically gather information about that burn and how it went. Cause yeah, I agree with you, Jessica. There's so many people that know fire, but don't have like the Western credentials. And then they're excluded from being able to participate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jessica, I really want to talk about I guess this how did you get into fire basically, and yeah, I don't know if I know that story.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for asking, Vicky. Yeah, I really have to credit my grandmother to like my pyromania. Um, that was like really instilled in me. I remember there was this moment like because my whole childhood, my grandmother had a farm outside of Silverton, Oregon, and we would go and visit there and like we would like burn piles. We would go and burn out in her pasture different things, but like sometimes her piles had like tree trunk in them and like huge just pieces of wood. And I think it was so interesting to later like get into prescribed fire with drip torches and like have all of these memories from my childhood come back of my grandmother with like a big yellow jerry can of diesel, like slinging slinging diesel on the burn pile and on like these big pieces of wood and then like flicking matches until it like went up in like a 15-foot tall like eruption of flame. um
So
and right, and I remember like as a child I remember my grandpa like during one of those experiences, saying to my grandma, like, oh wow, oh you guys are such pyromaniacs, and my grandmother saying, no, Stephen, we're fire people,
That's a
and
good quote.
like
Yep.
that for me like persisted really like I always had like a connection to fire even when I didn't as a child like know very much about Indigenous fire practices. I think like as a Chinook person like we've been in a situation where we're not really like we're just kind of beginning our revitalization of fire practices. We have a really different relationship to that compared to like you guys down on the Klamath River. Growing up, I always had a really good understanding of Indigenous fire through Calipuyan fire practices because it's present on the landscape. But no, I got involved. There was a training that happened. There was like a community effort a few years back that happened at a wildlife preserve that like Indigenous people are like helping steward outside of Eugene, Oregon, on Longtom Calipuyan land. And yeah, there was an effort to have like Indigenous prescribed fire training happen. And I did it with my cousin Jay Viles, and we were able to go and I met this sweet couple who I have spent the last few years actually working with, Mason McKinley and Rodri Wiseman, and they had worked with some other folks to help put together like an Indigenous fire training as non-native people, consulting with about how to, like correctly make a presentation that like adequately certified people as FFT2 or like basic firefighters. And also like equipped people with kind of like a global understanding of like different cultural fire practices, touching on some of the stuff happening in Australia, some of the work happening in Northern and Central California. I remember sitting in that training that was like, and that's where I first heard Amy Cardinal Christianson's name. Because I remember being in that like little like put together slideshow of like Indigenous like what are Indigenous people doing with their fire practices around the world and seeing Amy Amy Christianson a photo of you pop up. I think when you were pregnant with your daughter
Oh, yeah.
standing next to some fire and heard a little 5-minute blurb about you and was like, wow, I want to do that. And then we had this opportunity to burn with the Grand Ron fire crew, and Calipuyan people were largely displaced to the Grand Ron Indian Reservation in our Coast Range here. And yeah, we got like early October of 2021 got to sit down and yeah, finish our training and got drip torches in hand and I got to like burn with all of these people that I didn't know that I would like later go on to be able to like work with. And yeah, I think that was a moment where like that was like the beginning. That was the beginning of like really doing prescribed fire like being like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, you know?
Mm. Wow.
Um,
You have to tell us of when your grandma, though, to bring it back, because I think your grandma sounds also like an amazing character. And I think you told me about the story when they had to move into town, and
oh
but they
my,
were still trying to light fires everywhere.
my grandma, it's wonderful. She moved into town in 2011 because she needed a hip replacement. And I think being older and living on a farm, like hours from your family and getting a hip replacement is not a great recipe for a good time. So she moved into town. No, and it's so funny because fire is so persistent and like I think, I won't release her name or address in this, but like
Yeah.
I'll like the things, she that are so important, like having her wood stove, being able to like heat and if she needs to cook on her wood stove in town, even though it's like technically illegal in Eugene because of you're not supposed to have wood stoves anymore in town.
Like air
And
quality restrictions, probably, or
mhm,
something.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're in Lane County, which the Lane Regional Air Protection Agency is like exists there, to monitor air quality because the southern end of the Willamette Valley is kind of shaped like a bowl. And so if there's bad air or smoke coming from any direction, it goes right there and it sits. And so during my mother's childhood, there was field burning. Non-native farmers were burning their fields in the fall every year, and it wasn't happening in a coordinated way. It wasn't something that was like very cooperative with one another to like not just like absolutely smother the Southern Willamette Valley in smoke all at once. And so I remember, like yeah, reading about and learning about like times when like the I-5 outside of Eugene, there were like many, many car pileups and deadly wrecks because of the amount of smoke, like because everyone, it was a good September day and everyone would go out and burn their fields in the 60s and 70s. And so we have tighter air regulations around how much smoke can be put in the air and what the permitting process looks like in Lane County than here in Oregon than most places really have. And for us, even though like I really see why that exists, it also is something that can be a huge barrier to actually getting fire on the ground, because we
Yeah.
don't have that many days during like people don't always really understand that like when it's time to burn, it's time to burn. For us, prescribed fires are often happening at the same time as wildfires, And so it'll be hard because if there's too much smoke in the air from a wildfire, like we can't burn because the concern is that we'll just be like adding to the problem. When I think about like, I don't know, in my perspective, it's already smoky outside. People need to understand that like some good smoke is part of preventing a larger quantity of bad smoke down the road. So yeah, my grandmother moved to town and like it was such a process of to this day, I don't think that they recycle paper besides just burning it. Big burn barrel, backyard, small backyard.
Yeah.
It's so a part of our I think about that and I think about like as an indigenous person, like the urge to burn things,
Yeah.
manifests in my family in these funny ways, like can't go burn in the pasture anymore. Burn pile in the backyard. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I just think that's so cute. I can just see her out there just like itching to burn something. And so I'm wondering too, Jessica, if you can tell us, you had mentioned it already, but I know like you guys have recently returned fire to your for your nation. And so I know as well that you had shared the story when we were like together in the fall at that workshop about, what it was like what the land looks like, what was needed to do the burn. And so I'm just wondering if you can share that here and just let us know how it went, how your second burn went.
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I just feel so privileged to be part of a group of people, Chinook people helping get fire back on our land. just for some context, the Chinook Indian Nation is one that does not currently have federal recognition, which I think
Mm.
there's only 500 something tribes nationwide that have federal recognition when there's, thousands of tribal groups, and I think it's worth clarifying, on the West Coast, there's so many legitimate, like as people listen to this internationally on the West Coast of the United States, like I think about like the majority of tribes in California do not have federal recognition, and those are legitimate tribal people, tribal groups with
Mhm.
legitimate claims to their territory and ancestry, For us on the West Coast as Chinook people, we just actually celebrated a victory and a step forward towards federal recognition with the decision to, recognize us as the like inheritors of these Docket 234 funds, which are come about because in the 1890s, the Chinook Indian Nation sued the United States federal government for compensation to our land that was not ceded, that was taken by force. And so we were able to return fire this past July to a beautiful island called West Sand Island in the mouth of the Columbia River. And it was a really beautiful situation. I mean, unfortunately, West Sand Island is a place where our people were removed in the last 100 years, removed, I think, between the world wars, in large part, so that the Army Corps of Engineers could use that island to help stabilize the mouth of the Columbia River, which is a huge shipping channel, and one that's very risky, has a lot of shifting sandbars, and you
Hmm.
know, really affects trade on an international level. But West Sand Island is a place that like has been prior to that like an important fishing spot, an important place for our people. And we were my old boss and coworker Mason McKinley at EcoCities Institute was approached by some folks from this group Crest, I believe it's Columbia River Estuary something task force. I might have to get back to you with the proper name on that. About wanting, grant funding they had to burn a piece of West Sand Island. And luckily, Mason and other folks said, hey, let's do this with Chinook. Let's get Chinook people involved. Let's get Chinook people out there. And the objective of our burn was to really reduce invasive European dune grass. Dunes are shifting. We have them all up and down the West Coast here. And, in the last 100 years, I think they introduced this European dune grass that just takes these dunes from being like this shifting kind of like living, almost like slow motion water like
Mhm.
entity and stabilizes it.
Yeah, invasive. The European grasses, the dunes here on the coast. I know that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So they
And
introduced those to help stabilize the dunes because they didn't like the shifty nature of them. Basically, is
exactly.
that yeah?
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there are places today where, like, the dune grass didn't quite take hold in some spots. You'll be driving on the 101 and you'll hit an area where there's like yellow cones on the road because a dune is like slowly eating a lane of traffic. And it's almost like you have to be in like an intentional give and take relationship with the land.
That's cool.
Like reciprocity is required. Totally. I remember, growing up and like going to the coast in Florence, Oregon, where it's like, oh, the Fred Meyer is getting swallowed by the dunes. Like, okay, get your like leaf blower out. And so they introduced these grasses, like many of the invasive species that we have, like they introduced them with like some great like European American like settler mindset of like, I don't know, somehow taming nature.
Hmm.
And now they're a huge issue. And one of the things is they really cause an issue for some endangered birds and plant species. I know something we really struggle with is snowy plovers out there. It's a small shore bird that needs the shifting dunes to be able to nest and go throughout its life cycle. And so burning can be hard. what date are we going to have a good burn window, especially on the coast, it can be difficult with shifting weather, and we were able to get people out there, everyone showed up at like 6 in the morning. We like got people loaded onto the boats and got everyone out on the island, and it was such, oh my God, I'm just so grateful for like what people put up with. We had elders out there, we had children, we had parents, um, mostly Indigenous women. It was a situation where people came out and we looked at it and we said, let's do this. And yeah, we were able to burn a huge chunk of land, and it was a really beautiful scene. We had myself and several other Indigenous women and some children and all these Chinook people out there lighting like the first flames of fire, like Indigenous fire returning to our land for the first time in well over 100 years. And it was so beautiful, having, I think there was a bald eagle that came through, right? Like right as we were lighting the first bits of fire. And
Totally sacred. That's when you know
totally,
it's like,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Um, and yeah, lighting those first, we took time to sing and light our fire, and for me it was just so incredible because my family, I mean, Ilwaco is a place where like my family is from historically, and so it was really beautiful to be able to burn there with that that village being present where my family is from, and where like my family lived up until, I think my grandmother was the first person to really like, not like grow up there. To be able to burn with the village there and our mountain, Saddle Mountain, where we come from, across the water on the Oregon side, and like Chinook Point and all these beautiful, like important sacred places to us, just present on all sides. It was really like in the middle of the river where every like image and like landmark that comes to mind when I think about like the things that make my heart sing for my territory, like we're all there like around us as we put fire down, and yeah, we burned, and oh my goodness, does dune grass burn hot. We're talking like 20-foot tall flames and like thick black smoke, which is intense, and it's like kind of waxy almost. It burns, it looks from a distance like you're burning garbage, but it's not. It's just plant matter that I think has like a lot of like organic compounds and like oil in it, and plant oils.
Yeah, Jessica, who owns the land there? Like,
Yeah.
is it because you said like that your nation is at the moment like kind of landless? So is it private land? Like, how did you get? How were you able to burn there?
So that was Army Corps of Engineers land, and the nonprofit that
Oh,
we were working with was had an agreement with them, and we were able to go out and burn. Um, you know, I I don't know as much if they like were enthusiastically agreeing versus just like letting it happen.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, it was a situation that felt really liberating and really beautiful because I had never been out on that island. Many people, it was the first time getting to go there. Um, because we were displaced by the Army Corps of Engineers and like I know that the US military and the federal government as a whole was involved in that process, and so it was beautiful to get to go out there and like practice our like responsibility and like right to tend our land and like do that through good fire, and also have it be like a place where like some of us were like getting to go be there like for the first time in like nearly 100 years. Uh, which is so like hard because it's like right there. It's like just it's a piece of land that is so beautiful and beautiful. Like there's deer and sometimes the elk will go out there because they can just swim out to the island. But like because of who owns it, and you can't just walk onto it. It's a place where not that many
Mm.
Chinook people are able to go, and yeah, it was a
Yeah,
beautiful
and
moment.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. Like it brings tears to my eyes because I just think about, the struggle to get there and then, the happiness probably from the ancestors that you were able to be back out there and doing that work. I just remember an Australian saying, I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but he was saying like, that the fire, basically the trees felt happy because like the fire and the children's voices and stuff had returned to the area. So that's just what I think about with your
Yeah.
burn, that just return. So the second one, what was that like? Was it kind of the same?
Yeah, that was small, and my relative Quinn Larson and I were the only two people from our nation present. It was a small state parks in Washington. It's just kind of beginning to do prescribed fire as like, being the people running those burns. And it was a moment where, oh, I'm in the text thread with my cousin and a few other people, and hey, we think we're gonna burn on, March 15th or 16th, like, who can make it, narrowing it down from like three different dates to like two to one, and then I got the text, it's kind of hard with things like that. And I'll be honest, I didn't think that we were going to pull it off because we had like snow. We had like a week of like snow every morning from like 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then just like melting by mid-afternoon.
Yeah.
And
I just love that I got the text. Like that's so funny
yeah,
how lots of that happens around that. It's like just suddenly getting the word and you have to go.
right.
It reminds me of like surfing competitions, right? Where like the waves there, the competition's going, be there in
Yep,
a day.
Yeah.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, it was exactly. I mean, it was a situation where it was like, oh, the weather's right. It looks like the RH and the temperature are all lined up. All right, let's go, And it was maybe I don't know how many acres. Not that many. It was not that many acres. But again, it was like we had burned this invasive European dune grass in the fall or the summer during that West Sand Island burn. And let me tell you, it was hot. It was like burning that grass in July, even if the ocean is right there, it was toasty. It was like containing it was like, okay, like we're like using suppression tactics. And so like this second burn was like, okay, well, can we burn the same dune grass in March? Like, is that something that
Yeah.
works? Let's try it out. And so myself and one other person from our nation went out just to like be a presence there. I wish more people had been able to come. And we successfully like put a real dent in the dune grass in that burn unit, and it was beautiful to see. And my friend Rodri was like posting on their Instagram story. It's so funny. Like I love whenever Indigenous women are out burning, because it's like we're out there with our like giant earrings and nails and
Anti
everything. Like,
earrings, of
yeah,
course.
yeah. I think but that was like a highlight of KW Treks for me was like everyone with their big abalone and beaded earrings. Like I'm all like, how much of the time do your abalone earrings heat up enough to burn your neck? Like, but yeah, that was the second time Chinook people were able to put down fire on our land, since colonization, which
Okay.
was a really special experience. And it's something that I think like I'm just so excited to see this like resurgence of knowledge, because it's something that, I think for us, because we are coastal people don't always like have that same intact like understanding of like fire is a traditional tool for us. Like some people certainly do, but it's not as widespread, as
Hmm.
I perceive it to be in like certain other communities, like Yurok and Karuk communities. And it's so interesting because when you look at our traditional econom, our stories that we tell in the wintertime, and like our ethnography and all these other things, like it's there. The information about us burning is there. Um, but like even some Chinook people I know, like we have the perception of like it's wet. We're on the coast. How could it possibly burn? But it's important. It's important to us, and so to see that resurgence of knowledge is really. It's really
Yeah,
beautiful.
I feel that. I feel like on the coast here, some folks are like, "Was there even burning on the coast though?" And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely burns. It just looks different at different times sometimes than
Mhm.
in other places. But
Yeah.
and remind me again, I want to get completely correct. Like the area that Chinook people like live and are from is kind of like, how would you describe that? Like, is it like North Coastal Oregon? What is current day Oregon?
Yeah, I think Chinook people are like the people of the Columbia River, and the Chinook Indian Nation are the people at the mouth of the river, kind of from Cathlamet down. And so it's the Oregon and Washington sides of the river, kind of from like Seaside, Oregon, which is on the
Hmm.
north coast, up to the mouth of the river on the Oregon side, and from like Willapa Bay down to the mouth of the river on the Washington side, and then kind of on the river on either side up to about Cathlamet territory, which
Okay.
is and it's interesting. It's something that I don't think people always realize is like we are like the Chinook people at the mouth of the Columbia River and like the lower Columbia, and then there's Chinook people like Clackamas Chinook people here on the Columbia, like towards Oregon City, like and where the Willamette and the Columbia intersect, and in Portland, like that's like middle Chinook territory. And those people, largely were moved to Grand Ronde alongside Californian people. Then there's Upper Chinooks who are like now moved to Yakima, Warm Springs. People at Celilo Falls would be Upper Chinook.
Mm.
That's whenever I'm like when we just say that's why I always say like Chinook Indian Nation. There's like three distinct groups of Chinook people who each have different nations that they associate themselves with.
Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking we could talk too about like
Hmm.
matriarchs in your community, Jessica, and then also, being a trans woman from an
Mhm.
Indigenous community, what that's like as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'd love to talk with Jessica about I'd love to hear more about, what it's been like as a trans woman in fire and as an Indigenous trans woman working in fire in and out of Indigenous communities. And that's a huge thing.
Yeah, no, it's definitely I think gives me kind of a front row seat to all that I wish to change about the fire world, you know, which I think you both have a really thorough understanding of. It's hard. It's a hard and strange career choice and one that I like feel really committed to. I think like trope or like stereotype that like trans women all like get like tech jobs and just like work from home behind a computer, because it's like workplace harassment is like, oh, you
Yeah.
get the transphobia, you get the misogyny, like
Oh, and fire too. I just credit you for putting up with the garbage probably that you've had to
it's
deal
been an
with.
intense experience. It's like I think that not that many people have. I think it's interesting to watch people who are newer to prescribed fire like come in and they don't always feel safe around fire, but they're not afraid of other people. They're afraid of fire. Versus for me, like me and fire, we're good. I'm gonna try my best to not get cocky with it, but I do feel fire will teach me. But it can be really intense, like burning with people where like, okay, I'm putting down fire here, and the person who's upwind from me, who's supposed to be putting down fire in a way that like is thoughtful and careful to not rush me or push me, like, do they believe that I deserve human rights and the right to live? We'll find out. The level,
Sad,
yeah,
but
the
it's
level of
yeah.
like, when I'm on burns with new people and people I'm not really sure what their political ideas or their thoughts about trans people or indigenous people are, like, I'm more concerned about my safety when it comes to the people on a burn compared to like the fire itself.
Mm.
Yeah, it's been a real experience. It's been really interesting to like show up with this zeal for fire as an Indigenous trans woman, because let me tell you, the fire world is stacked against Indigenous people, and more so stacked against Indigenous women, isn't even beginning to crack open like trans people, let alone like trans people who are Indigenous or Black or POC or BIPOC in some way. I think about it, and I mean, it's when it comes to like inclusivity in the fire world, I feel like it's so far behind. Like, we're just getting to like white woman feminism in fire. We're still barely like in that stage of like what I call like girl boss capitalism. Like Barbie kind of like white women can burn just as good as white men can. It's like, okay, well, where does that leave me? Like what about the rest of us, And I think like we've all seen that as it plays out where like this serial thing of white women in fire who like because they're so focused on their own advancement of their careers, which let me tell you, like it's not easy for any woman to work in fire, like they'll be so focused on the advancement of their own careers that like often like within that they'll cause harm to Indigenous people, marginalized people of all backgrounds, Indigenous women, trans people. So I think it's like I'm always very clear to say like the problem is not just white men when it comes to fire. I think like I will always be critical of American like how like the systems that like control fire here in the United States are set up. That is based so directly on the United States military. And that is informed by these systems that perpetrated and continue to perpetrate genocide against our people. And like I think for me as an Indigenous trans woman in fire, like I'll say it, these systems that sometimes we have to work in and often act as barriers to Indigenous people doing fire, like they need to go, you know? I think for me, like as an Indigenous trans woman, like I'm willing to be blunt and forward in advocating for those changes to happen because my involvement in fire is already one where most people don't want me there. So like I'm not going to be quiet and nice about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and two, I feel like as well, just with the position you're in and that we're in, is you don't have a choice about whether you want to be
exactly.
political
Yeah.
or not, right? Like it's there. It's like you're forced into having to stand up for yourself, your rights, your involvement there. And so it just inherently makes you like that outspoken person a little bit too, where you have to be to defend
Absolutely.
yourself.
Totally. Yeah. I think, for me, yeah, more than I want. And I think I'm so grateful to have people who I get to like collaborate with and work alongside where like whether I like it or not, I'm going to be saying the thing that no one else wants to say. I'm going to be acting as an advocate in whatever ways I can because it can feel kind of lonely at times, like, oh, it can feel definitely like hard showing up in spaces knowing that there isn't always gonna be it can be difficult to show up and be like, oh wow, like okay, I'm the person here that like all eyes are on when we start talking about like diversity or marginalization or these things,
Yeah.
like um there is no
Yeah.
one
Where's our trans woman of
right,
the group?
right. There's no one more other than
There you
me,
are.
exactly.
Yeah.
So
I want to, it makes me think like if you feel like you're in a room where you're like already like pointed out just by being there, that to then also be like, well, I guess I'm going to say something about this and it's going
right,
to maybe ruffle some feathers. Then it's always just more so putting
right.
those pointing that on. And it's like, but sometimes,
The eyes on you. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
it is a brave thing to be outspoken, even though you're knowingly like, okay, I'm already kind of targeted for things, but
Mm,
I'm going to be outspoken. And that's a lot for
And it can be like, it sounds as well fun to be outspoken and an activist. And, like people are like, oh, wow, look at you. But it can also be career limiting and exhausting mentally.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah,
I don't think, that people get kudos enough for that. Like it's not an easy position to be in.
totally. Yeah, no, I mean, I think about this and I think about like attending that conference or that workshop that we both went to, Amy, in the fall, where like
Mhm.
I had a moment where I was like, oh, like, are the things that I'm choosing to say less legitimate because I'm not here on behalf of, I'm not getting paid to fly up here by an organization. I'm just doing this on my own free time, and I had to like look at what I wanted to say and say, you know what? No, because I think that for myself as an Indigenous trans woman, like there will not always be some group that is willing to create, yeah, a workplace where like I am welcome. When I think about the fire jobs that are available, like are some of those jobs, are they worth putting my like life and safety at risk, Are they worth choosing to tokenize myself in a workplace, or like choosing to put
Mhm.
myself in harm's way, like emotionally and physically? And
Mhm.
like that's not always, those aren't always compromises I'm willing to make. And so I'm so grateful to have like, strong sisters in Good Fire like the two of you. And also it's the kind of thing where I'm like, like I choose to care about and show up in this from like personal and spiritual level as an Indigenous person, knowing that like this will be my career, or sometimes it will be and sometimes it won't, like, but like that's never going to stop me from getting out there and putting Good Fire on the ground. And if I have to go and do it myself.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because lots of the perception I get as well from the fire community is that, oh, this major shift has already happened. And we were at a conference recently, and I won't say which one because it'll probably disclose the person, but a colleague of mine was sitting at a table, and like they had just had a presentation, a panel on diversity. And so he was like, the person there had kind of said to my colleague, like, oh yeah, great. So it looks like we've totally like addressed this diversity thing and we're good to move on from talking about it all the time. And it was like, what? And it was like at that conference there were a lot of women in the room, mostly white women, like you said. So I think by seeing that, he just thought like, oh yeah, we've addressed gender, but he like totally missing representation of minorities. And then also who's in power, like lots of the people in that room who were the females were students, like,
Hmm.
learning and stuff, but it's still a predominantly like in positions of power, it's predominantly white men
Yep,
still.
totally. Yeah, I think about like such a small like number of people working in fire in the United States are Indigenous, and of that, most of them are Indigenous men. Indigenous women are so hugely underrepresented.
And even the men, like it's going to sound mean, but lots of them too are upholding the
Absolutely.
colonial system of suppression, right? So they've found worth and value in firefighting, which is good. Like there's value obviously in that career. But I just in terms though of bringing Indigenous worldviews into the workplace, I think sometimes that's still really lacking.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like it can be really frustrating, and there are plenty of Indigenous men who I just am so grateful to them and how they show up. And also like I know, and I'm sure that both of you know that like as Indigenous women, sometimes like the most frustrating people to work with or like see in these roles are like white women and Native men, because they hold some like level of shared experience, and then when they choose to uphold that colonial or patriarchal systems, it can be so, be like, come on,
Mhm.
man, what? Like you're impacted
Yeah.
by this.
Yeah, I thought we were all together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
what the heck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we were all pushing for the same thing, but I guess not.
right.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I can definitely see that, and it is hard to, having worked a little in wildfire, there's not a lot of trans presence, if any,
Mm-hmm.
that I've really ever encountered on an incident at all. Not
Mm-hmm.
partly zero Indigenous women. It's definitely like yeah, that doesn't always make you feel like you're held in
Mm-hmm.
different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there is an element of safety of in multiple. not just
Yeah.
physical, but the emotional or spiritual well-being. And I think that those things, though, in the wildfire world are not seen as like, that's
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
evaluated.
Yeah.
But I deeply appreciate people who kind of just walk in that way in general, and
Mhm.
try and like hold space for that for you and in those kind of places, even though it's not a requirement. And that really feels like I'm like, yes, go
Yeah.
those people.
Yeah, totally. And I'm so grateful that like more and more people are starting to say, like, oh, maybe this is something I want to like get involved in. Which is why I'm like always like, how can we get people with drip torch or pitch stick in hand who don't have to decide that this is a career that they want to do, who don't have to like go and sit through extensive trainings, you know,
Mm-hmm.
how can we create,
They can just go burn.
yeah,
Yeah.
how can we create, especially for Indigenous people or like Indigenous women and trans people and Indigenous children, like,
Grandma.
yeah, grandmas, exactly. How can we have like our aunties and elders present too? Thank you for saying that, Vikki. Yeah, how can we have that happen? Because like that is how more trans people get involved in fire. That is how
Mhm.
we created a future where like fire is in the hands of everyday people, and we're able to
Mm-hmm.
steward our land and protect our communities through it. Um, and I'm so grateful, like, oh, I don't know where I'd be without Lise LaRue down at Karuk DNR. You know, or my coworker at Eco Studies, Nicole Barris, and wonderful trans sister in fire. So there are a few other people who are doing this work, and I'm just so like undyingly grateful to get to like share these spaces with them. And I can have those moments where I'm like, I'm not crazy. Like that happened. Like this is what that person said that thing. Wow. Like, um,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes it can feel crazy making,
For sure.
you can feel like
Yeah.
gaslit.
I was gonna say like Loki gaslit, just be nobody's like, is nobody else seeing this?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Having other people to feel that
Hmm.
way about things is really important.
And I think, yeah, and I think to me that's what grows the community too. Like, seeing people that look like yourself in those roles, right? And that they're able to go in the career, but that as well is hard on the people who are those ones that are putting themselves out there as well as like the example of, yeah, come do this, come burn when like we're also having our battles, right? It's not always the easiest to try to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
But I mean, for me, that's what, and I think we talked quite a bit about this in the last podcast, Vikki, but I think that was kind of the beauty of the Crook W treks when we all got together. Like I have my thoughts on Trexes is, I don't know if I've ever told them here, but I'm not the hugest fan because they're really reliant on the incident management a system. And I oftentimes think like, isn't there a better way that we can teach cultural fire? But at the same time, like I know, Vikki, we've had a lot of conversation about this and, that there's money in treks and being able to apply it to our communities in good ways. And for me, that was a real benefit was being able to kind of all be together and meet other people who are in similar positions and hang out for like a little bit more of an extended period of time. Like it wasn't just a 1 or a 2 day workshop. You really kind of got to see people, see them in the fire, see them in community. And I think for me, that was really great to build friends like both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yay.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I was only there a few days.
Yeah.
But
I'll never
yeah.
forget you in your like banana suit, like burning,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
like
Well, you really just came in, Amy, and at like a really interesting time, and then was just like
Yeah.
had a lot to say, and
it was so
I
good.
know.
it
Yeah.
was
Always a
great.
lot to say. I can't help myself.
Well, it
Yeah.
was great. It's like
I-
say it is
Yeah.
like saying it, and I was like,
Mhm.
yeah, like,
yeah.
just go with the flow. We're just
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think too, it's my responsibility as well now that I've been in this world for a lot longer is that there, especially when there's young Indigenous women coming up and they're struggling in a situation, like for me, sometimes I just need to be there and just, be an advocate and just say that, yeah, this is enough. We need to, I support you. Let's move on here. You're like you said, sometimes you're feeling gaslit and it's like, no, like let's move forward. You've got it right. And this is what we should be doing here. So yeah, it was a really fun experience. And yeah, it's funny because I had none of the proper training or certification. So I ended up following the media team around, and yeah, my banana suit.
Which for
And it was so hot. Oh man, it was brutal.
yeah, for like our listeners, I mean Nomex that we wear on Burns often here, like we'll have the green pants with the yellow shirt. And Amy
Yeah.
was walking around in like a yellow, like mechanic style, like long sleeve, like
Onesie.
jumpsuit. Yeah. One just like long yellow banana peel looking outfit. It was
Yeah.
great. It was
Yeah, well, I remember I said, because I didn't know I was coming, like, remember? Or anyways, there was lots of like approvals from my work and trying to get there. And so finally, when I ended up coming, I didn't have Nomex because like
Mhm.
I don't use Nomex when I'm doing cultural fire or other things, but you know, I wanted to respect the requirements there. And so yeah, I remember just going, and in our cashier, the guys they just had the onesies, and I'm like, whatever, just give me it.
Yeah.
Like, I do though now have, and if Parks Canada has hooked me up with an official Nomex, so I don't have to look like the banana anymore on
Beautiful. Awesome.
the field there.
Yeah. I had I mean, for me, I didn't even know I was gonna be able to make it to KW Trucks until like a day or two before. I remember that last
Yeah.
minute email from you, Vikki, like I was like, all right, screw it. I'm going. Let's do this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's so interesting being down in the Klamath, realizing, knowing Jasmine and being down there and realizing like, oh, I'm like the second ever trans woman that
Yeah.
people have ever
Mhm.
met or talked to, like for a lot of people in like Orleans. And I don't know, it's so interesting, even coming from a place up here where it's like the knowledge of trans people within our own communities was removed by force, And so like being able to develop the skills to show up and like have conversations with people where I might not walk away feeling 100% like people always like were able to like get all of everything right in one conversation, but like at least I know that I like communicated what I needed to, and I asked for people to use my name and pronouns, and I'm not, and I when with Indigenous people specifically, I have to maintain that understanding of like, we come from like communities with like rich gender diversity that was like, intentionally removed and disrespected, and so to be a
Mhm.
part of that resurgence is something that, I have to sit for those conversations, so that people like both of you can go back and have those with others in our communities who like, don't always have the skills, and it might be, even harder for me to talk to them about. Um,
Mhm. I mean, I appreciate you so much. That's,
I appreciate
it's
you too.
work in itself just to be you. And I appreciate you dearly for having those conversations with me
Yeah. Oh
and others.
yeah.
Yeah, I still remember Jessica too on the so when we did the burn, what was the one that was on the flats called along the river there?
Was that Tishonic?
Tishonic?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tishonic. Oh yeah. So earlier that morning, Vikki and I were actually at like a cultural fire that some of the women in her community were doing, which was amazing. Like the Krook women are just like incredible there, like with the amount of burning that they're doing and the leadership and the activism. Anyway, so we were at that burn, and then we came back, and I remember we were like in the parking lot walking down to Tishonic, and you guys were already had been burning. We'd been taking like some pictures from up on the ridge, and all of a sudden on the radio, it was Jessica, and Jessica was just like, like, because Jessica was leading ignitions at the time, right? Like the drip torch, or were you, or
Rob
somewhere you were
McConnell. Yeah, I was on Drip Torch. I was
on.
working with Rob McConnell, I think,
Mhm.
was running ignitions out in there.
Yeah, and it was like that thick blackberry, like anyways, it was burning pretty good. And I remember, yeah, we all got the call over the radio from Jessica, just in a super upbeat, cheery voice, like, yeah, so I think I've dislocated my knee. Like, I'll need, remember some, I can't remember what you said. I think I need to get off the line or something like
Yeah.
that. And we were all like, what? Because you were just like so cheerful.
Yeah, I had like, yeah,
I know, we were like, what? I remember being like a panic mode instantly, like, oh my goodness,
totally.
send in the rescue crew.
Yeah, I had sublex to my knee, like not fully dislocated, but it just popped out and popped back in, which makes me shudder to think about. But when I was down, and I'm just gonna blame like the gold rush for this because it's on all of that like
Gold.
mining, mine
Oh, yeah.
tailings,
The tailings, yeah.
Yes,
the
It's hard.
outwash. Yeah. No, I had stepped on a rock and it shifted and my knee had like popped out and then popped back in and so I was able to walk, but it was totally one of those situations where I was like, well, I have big fire over here and the river behind me and some smaller fire over there and then more fire here. And so I just was able to step over the flames and walk back through the black. And my radio had stopped working right then and there, which is like just one of those like silly, like total like Trex hodgepodge of like different gear like situations.
I know, we're all like, what
Right. And so
happened?
I
Like worst case
Right,
scenario.
and so I called, I think I used like Ronnie Reed's radio to like call in and was like but it was so
Mhm.
funny. And then yeah, and then went and was able to like I remember poor Lauren was doing medical and I was like she's like, I'm just gonna park you in George's office and you can get the Wi-Fi and like be on your phone. I was like, no, you can't stop me. No. I was
Bad patient.
yeah, I was like, I'm gonna check myself out of this hospital. Yeah. So I think I went and with Marlene Dusac and went and watched from Red Cap Road and watched you guys burn up there, which is really
Oh,
something special. So was able to see the rest of the burn happen from across the river.
a lot of great memories.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was really
Yeah, I
sweet.
mean, I was only there, I think, 3 days, and I have, like, just a pile full. It was a very
Uh,
eventful, fun experience, definitely. I mean, like, yeah, downsides too, obviously, but it's, with any event, it's kind of like that, but all in all, I thought it was great and the people we met, and, yeah, I'm really excited to hear that you guys are ramping up again, and probably by the time this podcast is released, you'll already have held, hopefully, the second crew W checks. I know there was supposed to be one in the fall, but you guys were actually experiencing your own fires, so
Mhm.
um own bad fires. So yeah, I hope that you're able to successfully have the event again in June. It was just such a good experience for people.
Do you think you'll be able to come down, Amy?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out. So most people don't know, but at the time this podcast comes out, I'll be well into my new job. So I'm switching.
Oh,
I'm leaving the federal government, and I've decided to go work for an Indigenous not-for-profit called Indigenous Leadership Initiative. So
um,
that's my only thing, is that I'm trying to figure out my transition and where I'm going to be and all of that. So I'm hoping. But yeah, I'll let you know. We'll talk about it in the next few weeks after I make that transition.
okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
yeah, congratulations, Amy.
Thanks. I'm excited. The dream for me has always been to work for an Indigenous org, but there was just so, as you guys know, so few positions in fire
Mhm.
working with Indigenous. And I always honestly, I'm jealous, Vikki, of your, that you can work for your nation and that you guys have such a great, department there that's really taking on fire and cultural fire. Because for me, our nation really through colonization was spread out. We don't really have a land base. So it's similar to you, Jessica. And so there isn't those roles so that would be for me, to go work for my nation in fire would be a dream, but it's unfortunately, I think, pretty impossible. So I think this for me is kind of the next good thing, which is at a national level, working with an Indigenous organization on fire and supporting nations that want to get into it. So
Mhm.
Awesome.
it's a huge, yeah, it's really supporting the Guardians movement, which in Canada
Yeah.
is huge. And
Yeah.
then the IPCA's Indigenous
Mhm.
Protected and Conserved Areas.
Yep.
And for me, when I feel depressed about the world, I always just look to the Guardian programs and the IPCA's and what Indigenous nations are doing across the world. And I'm like, that's the future. To me, that's where my hope lies.
Mhm. Mhm. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm so excited to see and hear what you're able to accomplish at this new position.
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to hear more.
And we'll keep going with the Good Fire podcast.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah.
too. So,
Such a service.
thanks, Jessica, so much for being on the Good Fire podcast today, and Vikki, my co-host as well. It was always great talking to you both about fire and even learning more, Jessica, about your experiences and in fire and what it's been like for you. So I'm really excited to see you continue to work in this space and what your future holds.
Yeah, hi Masi to you both. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you both taking the time to sit down and have a conversation today.
Yeah, Yoto, both of you. Yoto, Jessica. Yoto, Amy. It's always a lovely time.
Mhm.
And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, yay, thank you.
So again, thanks so much to Jessica for sharing so much of herself in the podcast, and as well to Vikki for being my great co-host there. Always wonderful to talk to the two of them about all the important work that they're doing. For the next episode, we're actually going to be going to Peru. So we're going to be speaking to Vanessa Luna, who's doing really important research with Indigenous people in the Peruvian Andes on fire. So both traditional uses of fire, but then also current fire suppression techniques. And I'm really excited for you to hear from Vanessa on the important co-developed research that she led there, the work that she's done with farmers, how she shared research results, the amazing things the community is doing in terms of agricultural burning. So stay tuned for episode 3.
A huge thank you to Canada Wildfire for their support of this podcast. As well, we would like to thank the Fighting Gunda Jamara for allowing us to share their fire song Ween as the official song of Good Fire Podcast.